evening, Rabotai. Let's talk a little bit about the laws of loans. When you borrow money, you lend money. So the truth is, right, that there's a Gemara that says, Stam halva'a shloshim yom. You know what that means? If you lend somebody money, and the timetable was not determined when you lend them money. In other words, when is he supposed to pay it back? When is the payback date? So if the timetable was not discussed, just lend him money. Came to you, said, "Okay, you lend me $1,000." Yeah, okay, fine. So he lends him $1,000, and they didn't discuss the time. So what happens is that we say, since they didn't discuss the time, stam loan, a regular loan, is 30 days. So that means he has 30 days to pay him back. This is the halakha, right? So you can come and ask for it at that time already. The lender can say, "Okay, well, 30 days." But that only has to do with money. When it comes to cash, when you borrow cash. But when you borrow items, like let's say you're borrowing somebody's car, right? Whatever, something like that. Or some utensil that he has in the kitchen, or whatever, some kind of mixer, blender, or whatever, God knows, whatever it is, right? Something like that. So if you borrow something like that, and the timetable was not determined at the time of the loan, outside the loan, so we don't say stam halva'a shloshim yom, because halva'a is only talking about money. But when it comes to items, if the timetable was not discussed when you were supposed to give it back, that item, right? So then, what happens over there? So the truth is a machloket, According to Rabbi Tam, also that's 30 days. So if they didn't discuss the timetable, he has to give it back in 30 days. But the truth is, all the Rishonim argue with Rabbi Tam, and they say, no, when it comes to borrowing objects, not money, there, the 30 days was not mentioned in the Talmud. So therefore, the rule is that the lender who lends you this item, whatever it is, right? He lends you his car, he can request it back anytime he wants. He cannot say, I took it, so I have to keep it for a month. It doesn't work like that, right? You took it, he gave it to you. He gave it to you today. But tonight, he calls you up and he says, listen, I got a wedding to go to, I'm sorry, can you give me back my car? So you got to give it back to him. He can't say, 30 days. What 30 days? Who told you 30 days? 30 days is for money, for cash, right? So the question is like this, right? What's the difference between cash and items? Why there's two halachot regarding these two things? Why the differentiation? So the answer is that when it comes to money, when you borrow money, what are you borrowing it for? Are you going to give back the same bills that you borrowed? No, for sure, right? For sure not. You're going to spend that money, and then you're going to give back different money. So what does that mean? It's going to take time, to spend your money and to give it back and to get the money that you have to pay him back. It's a whole process. So it takes time, So there we give you 30 days. When it comes to items, he lends you his car. What do you expect that he's going to give it to you for a month? What? That's a little bit ambitious, you know what I mean? So therefore, in a case like that, what we say is that he has to give it back right away. Whenever the lender just tells him, okay, you know what, I need it back now. Okay, give it back. What can you do, right? That's the way it works. So there's a difference between, as we said, between cash and other items. But there's also something interesting, Let's say when the guy lent you the item, whatever it was, right, the car, whatever. So there was a timetable discussed, So let's say he tells you, okay, you know what? I'll give it to you for a week, the car. And you can drive it. Give it back to me next week. So now the question is, if the lender wants to now go to the borrower and say, excuse me, I'm sorry, but you know what? I said 1 week, but now I see that it's not possible. Something came up. I need the car now to drive upstate. I got something to do up there. Going on vacation. So all of a sudden, boom. I can't give it to you for weeks. So now he's trying to go back on his word. I mean, that's the. So the question is, can he do that according to halakha? So the answer is no. Once you decided to give it to him for a week, you cannot ask him anymore to give it back for a week. Your word is your word. You got to keep your word. So what is that all about? It's about keeping your word, basically. Your word is a word. The Torah tells you, whatever you said, keep it. And be a gentleman. Be an honest person. Be an honest broker. Don't play games with people. You said something, keep it. That's the way it is. Oh, okay. Now things changed. Okay, too bad. So why did you say it then? Right? You gotta cover your tracks when it comes to that. Cover your bases. Make sure you know what you're doing. Okay, you made a mistake. Now you got to let him keep it for the timetable that it was discussed. That's very interesting. Okay, so now something interesting also comes up in halakha, which is that, let's say, for instance, somebody borrowed an animal, right, from somebody else. He borrowed a cow. In the old days, by the way, they used to borrow cows. What's the reason to borrow a cow? Because they didn't have plowing machines, so they used to use it for farming, basically, to plow. The cow would be pulling the plowing utensil, whatever, the thing that plows. So they needed the cow for plowing or whatever, or threshing, whatever, some kind of a job that they're doing with the farming, with the produce, all kinds of things like this. Today, nobody borrows animals. I mean, what do you need an animal for? What are you going to do with it? But anyway, the point is like this, sometimes what happens is that a person borrows an animal, and then, lo aleinu, Hashem Menachem, right, the guy died, the borrower, he died when he borrowed it. So now, what happens at this point? Once he dies, right? Do they have to give back the animal right away to the owner, or what happens? So the truth is that if he has sons, inheritors, people who are inheriting it, or some other inheritors, what happens is like this, if there's no son, then the daughters inherit. You know what I mean? If there's no daughters, then there's also some relatives, that are coming next after that. There's also a hierarchy of relatives that come. The brothers, the father, all kinds of things, right? All kinds of hierarchy that are going on there. So somebody is inheriting that loan that was taken, right, by that person. He borrowed a cow. So what happened was like this, right? That now the cow is in the possession of the inheritors, the children, let's say, right? In most cases, there are children involved. So the children can keep that cow as well, because since the loan was taken by the father, they're also allowed to keep the cow, and for that time period that was discussed between the borrower and lender, they can still keep that contract going, even though the guy died. Why is that? Because they inherit his loan, the children. They inherit it. Just like they inherit his money, they also inherit his obligations, transactions as well. That's what happens, right? So this is exactly the reason why, that in a case like that, the loan is still in effect. But here's the thing, right? Here's the catch. Now, when you rent something and when you borrow something, it's not the same thing, right? What's the difference between renting and borrowing? When you borrow, like you're getting a freebie, basically, it's like the guy's doing you a favor, So what does that mean? Now, the terms are not so much in your favor at this point. So what does that mean? You're responsible for everything. If something happens to that animal, you got to pay for that. Even though it was something which is unavoidable, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't negligence. We call that in halakha ones, something which was an unavoidable incident occurred. Let's say the animal died, just stam died, whatever. It happens, right? Animals do die, right? So the animal died, right? And it was in the possession of the borrower when it died. So what's the rule over there? The rule is that he has to pay for that. Why? Because listen, the guy did you a favor, you're responsible for everything, even unavoidable mishaps like that. You're responsible for that. So, by the way, there is a difference between some nuances there regarding that, just to make that point, right? That depends on how the animal died. So the halakha says like this: if the animal died when it was doing the job that it was supposed to be doing, the purpose that he borrowed it for, right? Let's say, as we said, right, he borrowed it for plowing. So if the animal died while it was plowing, says the halakha, says the Shulchan Aruch, that he doesn't have to pay for that. He's not responsible, because that's the reason why he borrowed it. So in other words, there was really nothing that he could have done to prevent that. So therefore we say, in a case like that, he's not liable to pay, the borrower. But if it died when it wasn't working, it was just hanging on the barn somewhere, So there, the halakha says he's got to pay, even though it's not his fault really that the animal died. He didn't do nothing. He was feeding it, was taking care of it like he's supposed to, right? Everything was going good. Same thing, by the way, goes for a car as well. Let's say if a person borrows a car, so boom, right? So the car just went, the engine went, something there, went, right? The car died, right? Whatever. So who pays for that, right? The borrower, the lender, who's responsible for that? So the truth is like this, right? The way it goes is that if obviously, right, the borrower borrowed that car in order to drive it somewhere, he wants to go somewhere with that car. So if he was using it to go the place he needs to go, that's the purpose that he borrowed the car. So there, he doesn't have to pay. Why? Because that was the purpose that he borrowed it. Same thing with the cow. We learned the car from the cow. The same concept. Just like over there, he's patur, he's not liable to pay, because he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just using it in the normal way, the purpose that he borrowed it for. So that's the way it happens. So same thing over here with the car, right? But if the car broke down, let's say, you went to parked it somewhere, you went to a restaurant to eat dinner, right? And you come out and the engine is gone, right? Doesn't work, doesn't start, right? The car doesn't start. So now you're responsible for that. Why? Because this was not being driven at that time. It wasn't being worked at the car for the purpose. You were just sitting there somewhere in a garage, in a parking lot. So that already you're liable, a borrower. A borrower is liable for that. So what does that mean? Even though he didn't really do anything wrong to the car, he just was driving it. But yeah, listen, the guy's doing you a favor, he's lending it to you for free. Go to rental companies. Let's see if they're going to give you for free, right? They're going to charge you arm and leg today, right, to rent a car. So he's doing you a favor, so therefore you're responsible even for that. But here, right, what are we saying? That, as we said, the particular case that we're talking about here is like this, that the guy borrowed something, right? He borrowed the animal and he died, So what happens is that at that point, when he dies, now the inheritors take that animal and then you can use it, as we said. They're the ones that can use it, or the car, whatever it may be, right? But here's the thing. Since now already things have changed, what does that mean? That those children that inherited the money of the father, they didn't really borrow the cow. They were not the ones who borrowed it. So they're not totally responsible like the father was. So what does that mean? The father was responsible even for onasim, even for things which are unavoidable, as we said, right? Just broke down, died, the animal died somewhere, right? Whatever, they're responsible for that as well. But when it comes to the inheritors, since they didn't really borrow the car themselves or the cow, whatever it was, right? They're not responsible for unavoidable mishaps. So therefore, if something happens, the animal dies in their watch, they're not responsible to pay for that because, after all, they didn't borrow it. They just inherited the situation, the transaction from the father. It was inheritance. It wasn't their decision to borrow the car or the cow, whatever it was. So here what happens like this, right? There's a special case that I wanted to get to, which is that it could happen, something like the eventuality like this, that a person borrows the cow, and then, as we said, right, lo aleinu, he dies. So now the children are in possession of the cow, but what happens is like this, that the children, let's say, they didn't know that this cow was borrowed. They thought it belonged to the father, All of a sudden, the father dies, the funeral is over. Now they see this cow in the courtyard, right somewhere in the barn. They say, oh, nice cow, wow. That's ours because we inherited from the father. They didn't know that it was borrowed. They had no idea. So what did they do? They went and they slaughtered the animal, and they ate it. Right? They had a nice barbecue. Right? So they thought, it was a freebie. We got it from our father. Right? So the question is now, are they responsible to pay for that? To pay for the animal that they mistakenly slaughtered and ate. And that's what they did. So here is an interesting halakha regarding this, that they do have to pay. They're responsible somewhat, but not totally. So why not totally? The reason is because, as we said, they didn't really know what was going on here. They didn't know that it was a loan. He borrowed the cow. They were not aware of this. So therefore, since they're not totally responsible, 100%, and really the truth is, it was the father's fault that he didn't tell them the cow was borrowed. He should have told them, the children. Why didn't he tell them this? So the truth is, it wasn't their fault. It was his fault. He should have told them. So now he's dead, right? What are you going to do? Punish him in heaven? What are you going to do, right? There's nothing you can do with him. In heaven, they'll take care of him over there, whatever it is they have to do. But you can't punish him over there. He's already gone, So therefore, the rule is like this, that they do have to pay somewhat, but not the full price. So what does that mean? They have to pay the cheap price. What does that mean, cheap price? What's the shot? What's the situation, right? So the truth is like this, right? When you go to a butcher, right? There's the full price for the meat, and then there's a discount price, right? Sometimes he wants to get rid of it, right? He wants to, gasahos, So he gives you a sale, right? He puts it on sale, and he wants to get rid of it, because if it stays with him for another week, it'll be spoiled already. It'll be gone. It won't be worth nothing. So therefore he's got to get rid of it now. So what he does is, he discounts it, right? So it says the halakha like this, Shulchan Aruch says, from the Talmud, of course, this is all brought down, right? That they have to pay here, in a case like this, since we have to pay the cheap price. So what's the cheap price? 1/3 discount, right? So they have to pay 2/3 of the value of the meat. Right? This is like a discount, the businessmen, give the butchers, right, whatever, 1/3. So here also the same thing, 1/3. He has to give 1/3 discount. So what does that mean? These orphans now, right, that inherited the father's loan, and were not aware of what happened over there, they have to pay 2/3 of the value of the cow, of the meat. Right? That's basically what happens over there. Okay, that's interesting, right? So, but here's another interesting thing, right? We'll end with this one. One more point I'll give you over here. What happens is like this, right? Sometimes the father, was a shezlebel, wealthy guy, right? Somebody who has some properties, has some real estate, blah, blah, blah. So he left it all to his children, obviously, right? Who's he going to leave it to? Right? To his grandmother? What is he going to do, right? He left it to his children. So they inherited land, some properties, or even some movables. We'll talk about that in a second, what the difference is between land and movables. But when it comes to land, right, what happens is like this, that land that was inherited by the children, there's a lien on that land now. There's a lien. You know what that lien means? In other words, you can collect from the land if there's any loans that he has that he didn't pay, debts. If the father had any debts he didn't pay, they can confiscate the land and collect from there. This is the rule in halakha, So what happened was like this, right? That when that father who died borrowed that cow, he automatically put a lien on his property, to pay that back just in case something happens. He can't pay it back. So what happens is now this land with the lien goes to the children inherited by them, right? So what happens is like this. Now there's a lien on that land, but that lien was already established before he died. This was before his death. So therefore, the rule is, in a case like that, if the cow, right, they slaughtered it and ate it by mistake because they didn't know that it was borrowed, but there's a piece of land there somewhere which was given on a lien, so there the rule is they have to pay full amount, not 2/3, right? Because with discount rate, right? We don't give them discount rate. What's the reason why? Because that lien was already established before he died. This is the reason why. Another important thing to understand, right, regarding this issue, is that the Geonim, right, who were about 1,000 years ago, or more, a little bit more, right, there's a period of the Geonim, which was before the Rishonim. These were big chachamim, big rabbis, with big shoulders, big people, right? So they say like this, right, that the chachamim, they say, the Chazal, the Geonim made an enactment in those times. They changed something from the halakha. What does that mean? According to the Talmud, a lien is only established on land, right? Not movables, not movable property. There's only on land. But what they did was they also now extended that the lien should also be on movables as well. So what does that mean? A car, right, or something like that, right? Something, a truck, whatever. He has some kind of vehicles, or some, some working stuff, whatever. All kinds of things that that he has. And now the children inherited that stuff. All kinds of utensils. Right? He has a tractor, he has a lawnmower, God knows, right? Whatever he has in his house, in his properties, in his businesses, right? All these kinds of things. So what happens over here is like this, that there's a lien on those two, according to the Geonim. The Geonim added that there's also a lien on the movables as well, not only on the land, on the karka. So therefore, now the rule is that if the person who died, had some movables like this, he had cars, vehicles, all kinds of things, so we collect from there too as well. If he had a loan, something that he owed money, and the lien was established before he died, so we go and we confiscate the land and we owe the movables and we collect the money. That's the way it works. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen, amen. Is there a minyan? We need more people. רבי חנניה בן הקשמע, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא צריך לישראל, לפיכך ירבה להם תום מצוות של אמר דמי חפץ, למען צדקו יגדיל תורה וידיר.